The Egyptians left a remarkable legacy. Their monuments and great works of art still astound us today. This program will reveal another surprising aspect of Egyptian life, their weapons of war and their lethalness on the battlefield. Archaeologists have found evidence of some of the most incredible ancient battles ever fought, changing much of what we thought we knew about the ancients. This is the story of the battle for supremacy between the superpowers of the ancient world. Our common perception of the Egyptians is of a cultured civilization, an educated people who worshipped their gods and rose to great heights of sophistication. Yet there is fascinating new evidence which reveals that they were also a warfaring people who developed advanced weapon-making techniques, including flexible metal body armor and deadly axes and swords. Some of these weapons would be used for the very first time in history, and some of the battles they fought were on a truly massive scale. The greatest of all was the magnificent Battle of Kadesh, fought between the Egyptians, commanded by Ramses II, and the Hittites, led by King Muwatalli.
It's the first human conflict that we have any sort of detailed records for.
Even by today's standards, it was a huge battle with thousands of charioteers.
It's not inconceivable that we could be thinking of a total chariot presence in excess of 6,000.
Both the Hittites and the Egyptians would bring new advanced weapons to the battlefield.
You could almost compare the situation between the Egyptians and the Hittite Empire to the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union in the second half of the 20th century.
The Battle of Kadesh is the defining moment in the reign of the great Egyptian pharaoh, Ramses II.
Imagine coming to the throne as a young man. New powers had grown up around Egypt who were encroaching on the boundaries of Egypt, and Ramses had to face this threat head-on.
Through his skill as an astute commander, Ramses protected the lands of ancient Egypt, allowing his people to flourish. The critical factor was ensuring the security of Egypt's borders. Egypt was a beautiful country. The Great Nile River fed the surrounding lands, making them rich and fertile. For thousands of years, the Egyptians enjoyed the benefits of this bountiful location. But there was a major problem. Due to the country's exposed position in the east of the Mediterranean, the lands were susceptible to attack from enemy raiders, crossing over from nearby territories.
If I could choose a place to live in antiquity, I think Egypt would be the place to live, and one of the main reasons is because Egypt had plenty of food. In the Bible, you read stories of people traveling to Egypt because there's famine in their own country.
By around 1200 BC, the Egyptians had a powerful neighbor who posed a specific threat. The hostile civilization, the mighty Hittites. At its zenith, the Hittite kingdom controlled large swathes of the country now known as Turkey, as far east as the Euphrates River and as far south to the Egyptian border to the lands we now know as Syria. The earliest record of their existence is from 1900 BC, and they were a powerful force for over 700 years. Yet their magnificent empire was almost lost to history. For thousands of years, little was known of their civilization until a series of remarkable discoveries were made in Hattusha, Turkey, in 1905. This amazing site is still producing a constant stream of evidence of weapons and ancient architecture. Archaeologists have now used the data to recreate these imposing city walls, giving us a glimpse of the impressive size and power of the city.
The empire, the state, can document its power by building and sustaining these large monumental walls. Some features of these walls are maybe comparable to present-day representative buildings like, let's say, the White House in Washington or other state buildings all over the world, which are also built to represent and document the power of a given state.
We now know how important the ancient city of Hattusha was and what a military powerhouse the Hittites had become.
They had to have a large, powerful, well-trained and well-organized army It was one of the key factors in their policy.
Archaeologists have discovered some rare and intriguing finds which show the Hittites' level of craftsmanship in their weaponry, including superb bronze arrow and spearheads, cutting knives, and an extremely well-preserved 3,000-year-old axe head. One particularly revealing find is a magnificent stone carving found on a wall 10 miles north of Hattusha, which shows the curved swords used by the Hittites in battle.
These gods are depicted all the same, holding a sickle sword. We think that the sickle sword is a significant weapon of the Hittite army.
It's believed that the Hittites developed a lethal sickle-shaped weapon, unlike anything the Egyptians were using at the time.
The Egyptians had made the critical error of allowing their military system to become obsolete, and indeed their military equipment to become obsolete. That is an absolute recipe for disaster at any period in history.
The Egyptian army of this period was an infantry force of bowmen, spearmen, and archers. For thousands of years, the Egyptians hadn't needed to significantly develop their weapons, as their enemies were no more advanced than themselves. But all this would change when they came into major conflict with the Hittites. The stockpile of Egyptian weapons would be severely tested. Weapons such as the mace. Housed in the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford is one of the earliest mace heads ever found. This stunning weapon is known as the mace head of King Scorpion. This 3,000-year-old beautifully carved mace head was used in ceremonies, yet other simpler versions were used to smash heads open on the battlefield.
The technology for putting the hole in the middle of the mace is really quite phenomenal. What they do is they heat the rock, they drop water on it, a few droplets at a time, just enough to cause a small crack. Then you can chip the crack away and you can repeat it and repeat it and repeat it, and eventually there is a hole in the middle which can then be worked smooth. It can crack quite hard objects quite quickly and quite effectively, so a single hit could do an enormous amount of damage.
It was a fearsome weapon. Employing 21st century technology, we can see just how much damage a heavy stone mace can inflict on a skull. Using a camera that shoots at 2,500 frames per second, we can see the incredible destruction wrought by this weapon. For thousands of years, it was wielded by Egyptians in battle as one of the most important weapons they used against invading enemies. But when armies that wore metal helmets reached Egypt's borders, the mace became useless. Strong helmets constructed from a composite of metals protected enemies against the mace. Having seen the effects of the mace on an animal skull, now see how much damage it inflicts on a metal helmet.
Let's have a look here. Oh, hit right on one of the rivets. And there we go. Perfect little match. It's not really penetrated though. Bit of a headache, but you might survive that.
By the 13th century BC, the Egyptian army had become weak against well-protected enemy forces and fell behind in the developing ancient arms race.
Egypt geographically was so well protected, with the deserts on all sides and the Mediterranean to the north. There really wasn't much need for them to develop any kind of more sophisticated types of military technology. However, later on, when they came under threat from the Kerma culture in the south in Africa and from Syria-Palestine in the northeast, at that stage, they simply had to develop more sophisticated types of military technology. They had to catch up with the other cultures who were their rivals in creating an empire in northeast Africa and in Syria-Palestine.
But there was one Egyptian ruler who would realize the importance of arming the country with cutting-edge military technology in order to survive and prosper.
For Ramesses II to remain a dominant player in the ancient world at the time, it was absolutely crucial that he stayed abreast of the times. His army needed to be on a par with the Hittite army.
New, powerful weapons which could inflict great carnage had to be made. Weapons such as the penetrator. By 1200 BC, the Egyptians had become complacent and for thousands of years had not developed their battle techniques. Egyptian warriors were used to the simple weapons they had relied upon for centuries, such as the mace. Yet with increasing threats from the Hittites, they needed more lethal weaponry. To retain Egypt's power, the great Egyptian leader Ramses II implemented huge changes in military technology and strategy.